Karma here with your July Astrology cheat codes. If you are here, you recognize that we are astrologically influenced by the planets and stars. And with that understanding of how the energy influences us, we can better navigate life's obstacles. So welcome to the club, and let's take an overall look at what happens in July. All right, so in July, we have several planets going into retrograde. We have Neptune, Saturn going into retrograde in the realm of Aries and will retrograde back to Pisces. We have Mercury going into retrograde in the realm of Leo. We have Venus transitioning into both Cancer and Gemini. We have a Capricorn full moon, and we have a Leo new moon. And additionally, Uranus crosses into Gemini. So there's a lot happening in this month, especially with this retrograde energy, because many of these things are aspecting back to Neptune and Saturn. So there's an emphasis here on lessons, okay? And when Saturn hits retrograde, it can become like a pretty ugly energy. Saturn retrograde energy can sometimes be a little funky, okay? Because Saturn is the planet of karma. Saturn is also the planet of lessons, right? So as it goes into retrograde, it makes you retrospective of the lessons that you need to learn. And sometimes that can be kind of hard. That's a hard energy, okay? That's a hard energy to navigate. So, Saturn is going to be in retrograde for a minute. All right. So this is just the beginning, but it will cross back into Pisces, so it won't be as active in that Aries energy, but nonetheless, still lessons on lessons on lessons on lessons, okay? Lessons on lessons. All right, so I'm not going to go into deep analysis of each individual transit. I will give you the energy of the transit as it is transitioning into whatever is happening. However, I will create separate videos for all of the things that are happening in July so that we can get a more deep dive look at what it is everyone is supposed to be working on. But this will just be a summary of what's going on in July. So let's talk about the signs. If you are looking at this from the perspective of your rising sign, okay, this will be most accurate for your rising sign. This is because it encompasses your horizon of your life, okay? Your rising sign, your ascendant sign, the horizon of your life. This encompasses everything, okay? If you're looking at this from your sun perspective, your sun sign, this will be in relation to your ego, your attention, your focus, okay? If you are looking at this from your moon sign, this will be in relation to your emotions, your instincts, and your intuition. Okay, so with that, let's jump into the end of Scorpio. Okay, so overall, there are retrogrades happening in your 6th house where Neptune and Saturn are sitting. This is your house of Aries, okay? And then in the 10th house, we have Mercury that will pop into retrograde in July. So there's heavy emphasis here around work versus career. There's heavy emphasis here around lessons about how it is you show up for yourself versus how it is you show up for your work or your career, your outer world. This is your habits in your inner world and your habits in your outer world, your ambitions within yourself, your ambitions for yourself in your outer world, okay? So there's heavy emphasis on that. And then additionally, we have Uranus crossing into Gemini, which is in your 8th house. So that speaks to a heavy transition. Okay, 8th house is ruled by Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto. Okay, so transformation, transition. The 8th house represents, like I said, transformation, transition. It represents death, regeneration. It represents mysteries, secrets. It represents wills, it represents bonuses, it represents legacy, it represents shared money, your spouse's money, other people's money, right? So there's heavy emphasis with that 6th, that 10th, and that 8th house. There's some sort of transition that's happening here for you. All right. And you need to have some sort of flexibility of mind. You need to show up as your authentic self. You need to take action. And you need to not fall into impulsivity or like fall into ego triggers, right? There is heavy emphasis here with retrograde. Retrograde talks about restructure, reflection, repair. All right. So there's an emphasis here with that 6th and that 10th house, the house of work and habits and routines. And then the 10th house, which is your house of ambitions, goals, the influence that you have, the power that you have, your career. There's an emphasis here on you being flexible, either around the actions that you take, you being flexible about how it is that you express yourself, you being flexible about how it is you perceive or the perception that you have in this particular moment. July is going to be working on that energy pretty heavily. Okay, so let's jump into the dates. All right, so on July 4th, Venus enters Gemini, and this is going to be in your 8th house, okay? So this is where Saturn and Neptune are sitting. Saturn represents the planet. Well, first, let's start with Venus, because that's what we're really talking about. Venus enters Gemini. Venus is going to be in Gemini for a little bit over 3 weeks, right? So Venus represents your creativity. It represents love, beauty, abundance. It represents your relationships, your partnerships. It represents peace and harmony. Okay, Saturn and Neptune are sitting in your 6th house, right? So Saturn and Neptune are sitting in Aries, right? And your 6th house, well, Saturn represents lessons. Saturn represents karma. Saturn represents the effort you put in and what you get back because of that karma, right? There's an emphasis here. Saturn is the teacher. Saturn is a structural planet. It teaches us how to build structure. And that's in your 6th house of Aries, right? So there's an emphasis here, right? As Venus enters Gemini, there's an emphasis here on you finding peace, you thinking of being flexible around some sort of transition in the things that you do, a change that's happening as it relates to your habits, as it relates to your work. This could be you shifting from work to career, right? Because we're also talking about the 10th house, which we'll get into in a second, right? This is a shift from one thing to another. So there's an emphasis here on Venus, right? Entering into the 8th house, creating opportunities, right? Creating opportunities for you to transition. But at the same time, on July 4th, Neptune also goes into retrograde in that 6th house, right? So that 3rd planet, Neptune, right? Neptune represents hidden. It represents your self-sabotage, your self-destructive behaviors. That is where substance abuse lives. Neptune represents your fantasies, your desires, your illusions, your delusions. It represents sickness. It represents like your sensitivity or your hypersensitivity, your imagination. It represents escapism, right? So with Neptune also sitting in that 6th house, very near Saturn, right? They're like 1 degree apart. So they are in a conjunction, essentially, right? They are working together to kind of show you some things about your behaviors as it relates to your subconscious, right? How that plays a part in how you build structure, how that plays a part in the habits and the routines that you put in place for yourself. With retrograde, Neptune popping into retrograde, Venus just entering into Gemini, you are finding opportunities because this is sextile. It's not good or bad. That doesn't necessarily mean, oh my God, you're about to get a new job, right? However, let's say, right, I'm going to give you an example of what sextile energy is so that we can better understand what sextile is, right? When we say opportunities. So let's say, because this is your 6th, your 8th, and your 10th house, right? Let's say you don't like your job. You have a clock in, clock out job. You don't like it. It's something that you don't want to do. right? You work at UPS and you tired of throwing in boxes, right? You tired, your back hurt. I don't know. I think it's because I saw that on TikTok. And the girl quit on the first day. But anyway, you work at UPS and you tired of throwing your back out. You don't want to work there anymore. It's work. That's your 6th house, right? Your 10th house represents career. It's something that you're building on. It's your ambitions and your goals. It's not something that you're doing to check off a box so that you can pay your bills. The 10th house is like, I enjoy doing this. The 6th house is like, I'm gonna do this because the bills got to get paid, right? So there's heavy emphasis here for you, Scorpio, on paying attention, right? So let's say you are working at UPS, like I was saying, and for a long time, you've just been like, I'm so tired of this. I don't want to do this no more. I don't want to do this anymore. 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 However, you know, you know that you don't want to do it, and you know that you need to be applying to other jobs, or maybe you want to go back to school, or maybe you want to, you know, whatever, you want to do something else, right? But you're dragging your feet on it, self-destructive ways, right? That's that Neptune energy. You're not updating your resume. You're not putting, you know, applications in elsewhere. You hate your job, but you're not making an effort to make life better for yourself, or make your daily routines in your 6th house better for yourself. So what I mean by opportunities is, in this moment, when Saturn goes into retrograde in that 6th house, Neptune goes into retrograde in that 6th house, Saturn will soon join it, which is why I said Saturn. There's an emphasis here in July. You hate your job, don't want to do it no more, haven't done anything to move on. The opportunity will come by you slacking off at work. You hate your job so much, you do something at your job that you're not supposed to do. You get caught and you get fired. Now you really have the opportunity to find something new. This is what I mean by opportunities. Opportunities don't necessarily mean that it's a positive thing, or that, you know, it will be beneficial. Yes. But if you in your head know that you don't want to be there anymore, but you are not protecting your peace, right? Venus, right? Protecting your peace and doing what you need to do to move on, right? That retrograde energy is going to bring something back. So let's say, you know, before there was somebody there that got on your nerves. They used to snitch on you and say that you've been on your phone. You're not supposed to be on your phone, right? Something settled. And then all of a sudden, you back on your phone, and that person snitches again, and you on your 2nd strike, and that person snitches again, you get fired, right? So this is that retrograde energy, something that has already been building in the past, and it requires you to really come back, restructure, reflect, repair that energy, right? This is that energy about that 6th house of work, daily duties, diligence, right? Systematic behaviors, right? This is labor, right? There's an emphasis here on that 8th house of transitions. You moving on, whether you want to or not. Okay. So with that Neptune retrograde, it pops into that 6th house. And that is where you get to think about them self-destructive behaviors, self-sabotage. Also, what it is that you desire, your dreams, your fantasies. Where do you want to go? Be delusional in this point if you want to. You know what? I want to be a lawyer. I don't have any of the credentials, but this is the time where you start making that happen. Okay. On July 7th, Uranus enters into that 8th house as well. It joins Venus in that 8th house. There will be, several degrees apart at this point. Venus moves way faster than Uranus does. However, Uranus represents sudden change. It represents, so clock that T of what I said, you fired, right? I'm not saying anyone here is going to get fired, but it could be a possibility, right? If you are not making the efforts, your mind, body, spirit are telling you to do so, and you not doing it, you are falling into self-destructive ways, you might be fired, right? Sextile energy. So there's an emphasis here on a sudden change as it relates to a transformation, you moving on, leaving something in the past. This could be inheritance. This could be, a transformation. Instead of you get fired, you don't want this job, you've been not wanting this job, you get laid off. layoffs, right? Sudden change, right? It leaves something in the past. It leaves something behind. It's also, the eighth house is also the house of resentment as well, right? It's the house of mystery. It's the house of wills and bonuses. It's the house of other people's money, shared money, right? So there's an emphasis here with Uranus entering into that eighth house of Gemini, a sudden change, rebellion, basically destroying the old so that you can start the new. Okay, so with that eighth house, and Venus and Uranus are sitting in that eighth house, right? And then that eighth house is sextile to that sixth house where Saturn and Neptune are sitting, okay? On July 10th, you have a full moon in Capricorn. Okay, so this moon cycle would have been in your third house. This would have been something related to your mind. This is something to change your perspective. This is your third house of Capricorn, right? So this is like your reflection about your ambitions and your goals. Capricorn rules the 10th house, which we will start talking about here in a second. Right, Capricorn rules the 10th house, right? So this is your flexibility of mind in your third house about your ambitions and your goal, your self-discipline, your reliability as it relates to your mind, how you perceive things, your perspective, your focus. Okay, so with this full moon in Capricorn, there would have been a new moon in this third house at the beginning of the year. This would have been the later part of January, I think January 29th or 27th or something like that, where you would have seen something pop around that time. This would have been the end of January or maybe 30 days, you know, before or after that something popped for you, right? And you get to see the result of it, or you get to see the progress of it as the Capricorn full moon starts to peek its head out, okay, in that third house. And this might change your perspective. This, you know, this may make you a little more flexible in your mind. This may, you know, ignite you into different behaviors, okay? On July 13th, Saturn hits retrograde. So this is where I was saying Neptune goes into retrograde on the 4th. 11 days later, Saturn goes into retrograde in that same house, that sixth house, right? So now we are now entering to the chat, fourth house. Now, the fourth house, this is where Pluto sits. If we really talking about it, this is the house of Aquarius. This is where Pluto sits. This is our overall change that's happening within our lives, right? And for you, Scorpio, this is your fourth house. This is your house of home. This is your internal security. This is your family, your ancestry. This is your generational gifts. This is your nurturing parents. This is literal real estate, your literal home, right? This is your upbringing, your past, your roots, okay? So this is rebellion, right? This is originality. This is your social behaviors. This is your logical thinking as it relates to your home. There is sextile energy from that sixth house to that fourth house. So now we have sextile, which is opportunities from the fourth house to the sixth house, from the sixth house to the eighth house, from the eighth house to the 10th house, right? So we have 4, 6, 8, 10, right? There's a transition happening, and it ties directly to your upbringing, your past, your roots. This could be your nurturing parent. This could be you thinking about, oh my gosh, you know, I don't know why it is that I act like this. If we go with the same UPS, you know, same deal with somebody working at UPS and don't want to work there anymore. Why, you know, do I do these things? Why am I working this job and I know that I hate it, but I'm not doing anything because of it? And maybe you're now starting to think about, right, with that Gemini energy, Uranus and Gemini, Venus and Gemini, you're starting to think about, Venus also rules mother as well. Maybe you saw your mom doing what she had to do, and she may not have wanted to do it, but she needed to raise you guys, right? Or you, if you're an only child, and, you know, she did what she had to do, and that's just what you've been taught, right? So opportunities, it exposes something here for you to change your behavior, change your perspective, change your thoughts. So now it's bringing you back to your generational, this is bringing you back to your upbringing. This could be generational trauma for you. This could be, you know, your sense of security, right, as it relates to yourself. So there's an emphasis here as Saturn, because now Saturn, both Saturn and Neptune are in retrograde in that 6th house. And again, that's your house of your habits. That's your house of your daily routines, right? So again, sextile energy from the 4th house to the 6th house, from the 6th house to the 8th house of transformations, from the 8th house to the 10th house of ambitions, right? Ambitions, transformations, habits, and home, right? So this is the energy of July for you, Scorpio. Okay, then on July 18th, Mercury goes into retrograde. Another planet in retrograde. Hooray, hooray. So now we have 4 of them. We have Pluto in that 4th house in retrograde. We have Neptune and Saturn in that 6th house in retrograde. We have Mercury in retrograde in that 10th house. So this is where the 10th house comes into play. Mercury is the planet of your mind, the communication. This is internet. This is your humor. This is your intelligence. This is your logic. This is like your observations, okay? So that's your 10th house, and that's your house of ambitions, right? So this is how you think, your observations around the house of ambitions, which is like, again, career versus work. Work is the 6th house. Career is the 10th house. Contributions to society, okay? This is your dominant parent. So this might be your father, right? This is your reputation, the power that you have, the influence that you have, your achievements, your goals, the honor that you have, okay? So that is again sextile to the 8th house of transformations. Okay, so that's where Uranus is sitting. There's something here that is changing. Rebellion, that is where Venus is sitting, right? Venus is now at this point made her way halfway through Gemini, right? So Venus is pretty far away from Uranus, but nonetheless, Venus is in the 8th house as well, which is Venus is creativity. Okay, Venus is peace, abundance, right? So there's an emphasis here on opportunities around creating things for yourself or creating energy for yourself that supports you in feeling more internally secure, creating habits for yourself that transform your everyday living, right? From, maybe something that you don't want to do to something that you enjoy doing. It's time for a transformation. And that links all the way back to that 4th house where Pluto is sitting, right? That is the overall change that is Pluto is the most outer planet. Pluto stays in Aquarius until 2040 something, right? So you're at the beginning of some sort of journey, and you're coming to realization in this moment that it's time for a change. It's time for something new. That's what's happening in July for you, okay? Then on July 22nd, the sun enters Leo, and again, that's the 10th house. Your ambitions, your goals, right? So with that sun in the 10th house, there's heavy emphasis on your ambitions and goals. What do you want? What do you want to do, right? How do you want to influence? What power do you want to have? What career do you want to have, right? This could be as it relates to like your honor. This could be related to your fame, right? So there's an emphasis here on a transformation with that sextile energy from the 10th house to that 8th house, a transformation. And again, there's still that sextile energy from that 6th house of routines to that 8th house. And then a couple days later, we have a new moon in Leo, right? So this is the initiation of something. We'll have a full moon in Leo sometime at the beginning of next year, right? Where you'll see the conclusion or the development of this energy. But pay attention to what's happening on the 24th, on or around the 24th, right? Because we have this new moon in Leo. We have Mercury in retrograde in Leo. We have the sun that just crossed into Leo. So there's heavy emphasis here around lessons that come towards you that change your perspective around your ambitions or what it is that you want to achieve or accomplish, right? And with this new moon, there is some sort of opportunity here that pops up for you to grab on that you can start developing over the course of the next 6 months. And that 10th house is trying to that 6th house again, where Saturn and Neptune are sitting. Okay. And then last but not least, we have Venus that enters Cancer on the 31st. Okay. So Venus enters Cancer in that 9th house. Okay. So Venus enters into your 9th house, which is your house of creativity. This is not your house house of creativity. This is your house of discovery and exploration. Okay, so this is your house of higher education, second life partner, long-term travel, you know, religion or spirituality, cultural learning, right? This is vacations, this is laws, this is ethics, right? So there's square energy here now, right? All the rest of them are like opportunities to, you know, improve, and, you know, you get to take on this energy and trine energy, which is easy flow energy. It should work very well together. Then you have the square energy in this ninth house, between this ninth house and this sixth house, with that 90 degrees of separation. Okay, that square energy to that sixth house. So this is Cancer, water, Aries, fire. Water and fire don't mix in the realm of astrology, which is why it's a square, right? It's like oil and water. You're going to struggle in this area. So this is your routines, and this is like what it is that you want to do. So again, if we go back to the UPS, working at UPS, and you get laid off or you get fired or something, now you're turning your wheels. You don't know what you want to do. Like I said before, maybe you decide you want to reach for the stars. You want to become a lawyer. You want to start studying law. Well, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you nurture that? Where do you go? This is where that square energy comes into play, because it's like a sudden change for you. So what do you do suddenly? All of a sudden, this is not really what I was anticipating to have to deal with right now, but I got to figure it out. And there are going to be difficulties, right, as it relates to you navigating through this energy with that Venus, which is, you know, creativity, love, abundance, partnerships, relationships, harmony, and peace. In that ninth house, being square to your daily routines, what it is that you do within your daily routines. And again, with Saturn and Neptune in retrograde in that sixth house, there are lessons here, right? There are lessons. You're going to feel a bit overwhelmed with trying to discover a change in your habits that will support your long-term goals, and really like pointing that back to your fourth house where Pluto sits, of your internal security, right? Your home, right? So there's an emphasis here for you, Scorpio, right? To really pay attention to what it is that you want to do. What are your ambitions? What are your goals? How can you support yourself in achieving those in July, right? There is a transition happening. You cannot fight that. Sorry. That's the energy that you're in, Scorpio. There's a transition happening. The best bet for you is try to figure out how to make this transition as easy as possible. Okay, so that's what you're going to be working on in July, Scorpio. I hope this reaches you well.